Hi, everyone. Okay, so I just want to share some stories with you, really. And the first story I'm going to tell you about is when I was 6 years old. I remember my dad coming home from work. He'd just come off an 18-hour shift. He was tired, he was weary. And he sat in the corner of the room in his armchair, and he called me over. It was quite late at night, and he asked me, "What are you doing up?" I explained to him that there was fighting, and he clearly understood what I meant. I shared a room with my brothers. We had a bunk bed, a double bed, and a single bed, all cramped into one room. We had cupboards that were overfilled with clothes, we had green carpet, and we had Superman wallpaper. We really were cramped in this space, and every now and then my brothers would decide to play some random game. Normally, this involves some form of fighting or jumping from bed to bed. On that particular day, they decided the green carpet was water and that they weren't allowed to touch the water, and for that reason, they would be jumping from windowsill to cupboard to bed. This resulted in me getting upset. I went downstairs, I spoke to my mum. "You're grass," they told me, and so I ended up sitting downstairs. When my dad sat with me and we spoke, he asked me, "What do you want to be when you get older?" "I want to have my own shop," I said. "I want to be a shopkeeper. I want to be a business owner." He looked at me, he smiled, and he sat me back down on the chair as he went to eat his supper. "You need a lot of money for that, Missy," and he walked off. A few months later, me and my brothers, we were given bikes, and we'd ride around the town, all the parks and the local areas, and we'd speak to each other on the walkie-talkies, and we'd share these ideas of us being secret agents, riding around on secret missions. Well, we didn't really solve any missions. The best we used to do was ride around the park and maybe buy some sweets, but at that time, that was even amazing. After that, I decided, or I thought, I wanted to be a fashion designer. My mum had always dressed me in baggy clothes and all the hand-me-downs from my brothers, and I really wanted to start to up my game. And so I started to draw different designs on paper that I found around the house. I thought to myself, I'm going to be this amazing fashion designer. I'm going to do amazing things. I'm going to have all the designs on the catwalk. And then, nothing. After that, I went on my first family holiday, age 14. And my dad booked us into this amazing, opulent hotel. It had marble floor. It had velvet curtains. It had chandeliers. First time I'd ever seen anything like this. When I returned to the UK, I imagined myself to be this hotel owner. I thought, this is it. This is my calling. This is my purpose in life. And I dreamed. The reason why I'm sharing these dreams with you is because when you're a child, you can dream. You're allowed to dream. You're supposed to dream. But what happens is we start to forget how to dream. And why? Life. At 15, my dad died. He died very much in front of my arms. And he was everything my mum knew. He was somebody who was the community member. He was somebody who meant a lot in our family, if not everything in our family. And slowly, we started to come apart. I started to not care about school. I hated going to school. My mum had no idea of the school system. They were both immigrants. She didn't speak a word of English. And so I started to have behavior issues and be naughty, as they term me. Insolent, they called me. Rude, they'd call me. You'll amount to nothing, they'd say to me. You're a failure. You're going to do nothing in your life. I left thinking I was stupid. I didn't think I was going to achieve anything. But I was blessed. I was lucky that I quickly got into college, and there my life changed. I started to feel that sense of ambition, that sense of drive again, and I started to take my studies more seriously. In 1999, I graduated as the first girl in my whole entire generation to have entered university and graduated from university. After that, I was able to secure a great job. I was working full-time, and I was getting paid well. I was buying nice things. Everything was working out as I'd planned. I got into a management training scheme very quickly. So life was great, and I thought that's how it would be. Everything was going to happen the way I'd planned it. But in 2002, I became a mum for the first time, and things changed. I thought I had it all planned out. I'd read the books, I'd watched the videos, everything was going to fit in place. It didn't. Everything felt really alien to me. It was really an unusual feeling. I felt down all the time. I felt low. I felt angry. I felt tired. I felt scared. I felt paranoid that somebody was going to hurt me, my child. Everything was just not as it should be. When the midwife came to see me, she asked me a few questions. She ticked a few boxes. She told me I had postnatal depression. This is a depression that affects 1 in every 10 parents. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because a lot of people might experience this themselves or might have gone through it without even realizing. At the time, I didn't want to tell anyone. I kept it to myself. I thought if I tell anyone, it'll show that I'm a failure. It will mean that I'm not coping. In addition to that, I didn't really want anyone to know because I felt that if they know something this personal about me, they're going to judge me. And so I didn't bother to get the help that I needed. And that in itself, I think, started the self-destruction that I caused. The thing I want to share with you today, the idea I want to share with you, is that this whole idea that everybody tells you that you've got to believe in yourself is a very, very hard thing to achieve. When I Googled the search self-belief, it came up with over 164 million results. That's a lot of ideas and thoughts about self-belief. When I myself started on the journey of trying to find out how I could be the person I really wanted to be, it was difficult because there was so much advice, there was so much things that were being told to do. So I stripped it back and I started to really, really focus on a few things. And the first thing I started to do was challenge those beliefs. So I'd always thought to myself, I'm too slow, I'm too big, I'm too unhealthy, I don't eat well, I never thought that I could be somebody who could hike. And yet, when I challenged that belief, I was able to reach Mount Snowdon, the highest mountain in Wales. And I reached that in the dark with nothing but a headlight. When I challenged myself to be a runner, and I challenged that belief that I wasn't fast enough, I was not good enough, that no woman in a hijab should be running, I was able to run a marathon, half a marathon, sorry. Not once, but twice. Add them up and they do come to a marathon, 2017, 2018. So there I am running these 2 half marathons, challenging myself and challenging those self-beliefs that I have. When I challenged myself to the idea that I could never be more of a fundraiser, I love giving to charity, I do a lot of work with charities, I thought that that was it, giving a few pounds every month, that was good enough. But I also wanted to put myself out there and try and do something different. And I was asked to speak at a leading charity event, and I met a very, very famous nasheed artist, Zayn Bika. One of the things I always wanted to do when I was a child was to write, but I always thought my English was never good enough. I always saw others that really didn't struggle with English, and they were really great at writing and talking. This is why I wanted to become a public speaker too, but I thought, again, that's never going to happen, right? So when I challenged this belief that I wasn't good enough in my English and that I wasn't going to be able to achieve anything in that domain, I was actually able to create my own blog, and I started that in January of this year. The idea of me not being a good parent or me not being able to bring a child up, that's the result. My 16-year-old daughter, who is an amazing and beautiful individual. So how did I do it? Well, the first thing I needed to do was really to listen to my inner voice. And in Arabic, we call that the nafs. It's the voice that tells you who to be and who you really are. But a lot of the times, we try and not listen to that. We try and limit what we tell each other because we've got a story that we've created ourselves. We've started to create these limiting beliefs about ourselves that we actually believe are truths. We don't necessarily have the evidence for that particular belief, but we create that evidence. We start to imagine that if we do anything that's outside of what we've done all the time, it's going to end in pain and heartache. But I've testament to the fact that it hasn't. I also needed to realize and understand that God wasn't enough. And this is controversial, right? I'm a Muslim, I'm standing up here and I'm saying God's not enough. Well, what I mean by that is really goes down to a very, very famous story about the prophet. And the prophet saw a Bedouin who had a camel, and camels in that time were literally like our most prized possessions, our cars, our Mercedes. And he saw this Bedouin leave his camel untied as he went about his work. And the prophet at the time asked the Bedouin, "What are you doing? Why aren't you tying your camel?" And he said, "Well, I believe in God, right? I believe in Allah, so why do I need to tie my camel?" And at the time, the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Well, yes, you can believe in God, but you also need to tie your camel." What do I mean by that? Well, before you can expect a reaction, you have to take an action. You can't sit there and just believe that something will happen to you. It doesn't matter if it is just the power of the universe, the power of attraction, whatever it is that you believe. The fact is that you have to do something. You have to start a momentum. You have to go and make a plan or do something in order to achieve something. And I started to realize this quite late in the day, but I'm hoping that sharing with you today, you'll start it earlier on. I also needed to understand that our journeys are different. My journey and the reason I'm standing here is very different from the speakers that have already come before me and the ones that will come after me. But the fact is that it's a journey in itself, and we need to understand that, and we need to accept that. There's no two journeys that are going to be the same. Sure, you're going to share parts of it with people, and some experience will be the same, but it's your own journey. It's your individuality that will create that journey. I also needed to change the story. I told myself that I was a mum, and that's all I needed to be, that it was enough for me, and that really wanting anything else or wanting to do anything else was just silliness. I recently spoke to somebody who I haven't seen for quite a while, and he's a good family friend. And I asked him how he was, how's the children, how's the wife? Yeah, great, stressed, depressed, all these things. Sounds awful, right? But the point was, he asked me how I was, and I said, I'm doing great. I've just recently went up Scaffold Pike, I've done the Mount Snowdon, I've blah-de-blah, doing all these amazing things, which I feel are amazing. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. But the point is that it's what I believe to be great. And he said to me, oh, okay, so you're going through a midlife crisis, right? I went, okay, if that's what you believe. And these are the stories that people tell you, and these are the stories you start to believe yourself, that at being the age of 42, I'm not meant to have dreams, I'm not meant to have ambitions, I'm not meant to have goals. Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe for 1 minute that any age should define you, any experience should define you. You are you, and you have limiting beliefs, but you can get over them. There are going to be things that are going to get in your way. There are things that are going to hurt you. There are things that are going to trouble you. But you really do need to believe in the process. Everything you're going through, everything you're experiencing is really a part of who you're finally going to become. Rather than reject those ideas, you need to embrace those ideas. You need to challenge those ideas. You need to think, right, if I've had this experience, what is it telling me? What is it teaching me? It may not end up in the result that you expected it to, but that's a good thing. Finally, and one that I always try and teach my children as well, is don't compare. As a parent, I was always comparing myself. I'd go to playgroup and I'd see all these parents really giggly and happy with their children. They'd get down and start doing all these paintings and drawings, and I'd be sitting there thinking, all right, well, that's a bit boring. I'm not really into that. Every now and then I would get involved, but most of the time I just felt out of sorts. I felt it wasn't right, that I was sitting there doing that, when really what I wanted to do was take my children to a museum or take them somewhere else and away from that environment. It was interesting because you feel conditioned to be a certain way. And that conditioning comes especially nowadays from social media. Now, I'm not saying social media is wrong. I think it can be used. But I think at the same time, it could cause a lot of pressure on individuals to be a certain way, act a certain way. It erodes on our self-esteem. It changes our belief about ourselves. But you're amazing. I'm amazing. We're all amazing. We just got different things, we've got different journeys, we've got different lives, and we need to embrace that rather than keep comparing it to everyone else's. So my great idea about self-limiting beliefs and belief in yourself is that don't worry if what you're doing doesn't change the world. That's not maybe what you're designed to do. That's not who you are. All you need to do is change the world that you live in. Change the things that you believe you can't do. Challenge those beliefs. Psychologists and a number of different theorists have come up with ideas of how that can be done. All I've done today is just share with you some of my ideas. Thank you.